I am coming at you pre-recorded from my basement. Welcome to the YouTube channel. My name is Jacob Gill. This is I think I'm just calling this the Gillopedia. If you watched, oh my goodness. If you read any of my movie reviews, then you know that this is just a passion of mine. Trying to just see how a talk at you format comes around. We'll see how much we, edit. I probably will not do like sparkles and flares. You're literally just going to see my hands do this because I'm not taking the time to put in effects for this. What better way to do my first video than with Madame Web? This is a film. This is a film that some people watched, most people did not. And you shouldn't. It's not a good movie. We'll talk about it, and I'm going to spoil it, and you're not going to care because it's Madame Web. Let's see how this goes. Now, before we actually get into just the details of the film, just who's, running the show here, who was involved, the writings on the wall. And it all really started with Dakota Johnson gave a few different interviews that were just bizarre. Like, she would say stuff, not so much bizarre. Dakota Johnson would just kind of talk trash, but still fulfilling her obligation, like promoting the film, basically. Where she would be like, yeah, I signed on. And then they changed stuff, so we'll see how this goes, because I just filmed in front of a green screen. And she has a lot of valid points. I'm sure she's probably telling most of the truth that studio got involved, the writers had to change things up, and it really wasn't the vision that she thought she was signing on to. Let me just be clear, Dakota Johnson does not do a good job. In fact, nobody does a good job in this movie. It's one of those things that I think it's become like a bit more apparent that people aren't just so quick to blame the actors or even really the directors for movies and TV shows now. Now they kind of know it's a bit more like producers, studios. Sometimes the writing is just bad. Sometimes it's all bad. And that's where Madame Web comes into play. So for one thing, you have the writer-producer combo of Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless, I think are the names. And for all that people, were talking about this movie, people were basically saying, well, it might not be as bad as Morbius, and that was like the highest praise that I basically was hearing from anyone. And it actually makes a lot of sense because that writer-producer combo produced Morbius as well, and they just have been in kind of the mindless blockbuster, not original, no one really cares about this. There was Gods of Egypt, I don't think I even watched that. Dracula Untold, Power Rangers, that one actually I guess was a decent movie. But there's just nothing to write home about, and somehow these guys keep getting hired to do this stuff. They, to me, are probably the biggest people that should hold blame. But you also have just like Dakota Johnson not doing a good job. The director who's done a few like TV show episodes, a couple of good things under her name. The blocking and just the comedic timing, it's so bad. That's on the director, that's on the actors, that's on the editing. The editing is atrocious as well. There's just nothing that goes well in this film. Plus, like you have the worst villain possible. You have Sydney Sweeney and a couple other chicks that are pretending to be teenagers, and it's weird. It's weird. Sydney Sweeney is literally just 2 weeks older than I am, and just because you dress her up like a schoolgirl does not mean she's a teenager. I thought we were over these days of like trying to make it believable that these adult actors can play teenagers. Apparently we're not over that. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating how bad this movie is. It's not a good bad. It's not enjoyable. It's just so bad. There are a couple moments I did chuckle at unintentionally, like as in they weren't supposed to be comedic. Let's talk about just the story and the dialogue, because that's really where everything falls flat the most, is just, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Now, I think even with the way this movie was shot, written, there's salvageable stuff. I just completely disagree with the direction of the film entirely, and they should have had more rewrites, because why would you make this movie? But we'll get into that in a little bit. Let's just start from the beginning. I watched this movie twice so that you can watch it none. Don't watch this movie. I suffered for this art. Let that be the lesson learned here. So we start off in, I think it's like the Peruvian jungle, where we have Dakota Johnson's character is Cassie Webb, and we follow her mom, and her mom has this bodyguard, and she's searching for this spider. And the way they build up just like the mystery of this is she says that no one has ever successfully been able to spot this spider. And then the bodyguard just says something stupid of like, the only reason why I came here was because of how promising things looked. And like, they say lines that don't exactly correlate with what the other person said. They're just like trying to exposition themselves for setting up who their characters are. It's very strange. Literally like 10 seconds go by, and then the Cassie's mom comes back and goes, I found the spider! No one's found it before. How did I do it? We won't explain that. It doesn't matter, because look, I found it. And then the bodyguard, who turns out to be the villain, as a surprise to no one, we all knew who he was. He goes to grab the spider. He's got his gun. They're like tussling back and forth, and he's trying to give himself the out as the, oh hey, I'm not just pure evil, because he says like a line like, you could just walk away right now. And then the gun accidentally fires off and shoots her. Before that though, I did quote, because this is literally one of the only like pieces of exposition about the motivations for the villain. I don't know what the villain's name is. They don't ever say it. He's just in a evil Spider-Man costume. It's actually kind of cool looking, and they don't really give enough screen time for it. But he says, I'm not interested in helping people. No one helped me when my family was starving. My road was not as clear as yours. We didn't have the same choices. What? I literally think AI might have played a part in this movie coming out. What does that mean? What? Just like, it's just the most generic stuff I've ever heard. It means nothing. And it's just the stupidest way to try to set this character up. And so they transition from, okay, he got the spider away from her. The spider people try to save her. They let the venomous spiders bite her, so that then the venomous powers flow through into Cassie. Baby gets born in this pool. Baby cries, and they, like, even just the transitions just don't work. They try to match the baby cries to the ambulance, and that's how they transition to not modern day. This movie takes place in 2003, but that's their transition, and it's like kind of screaming, kind of other alarm noise. Again, it's just a bad transition. It doesn't work. Now, the second time I watched the movie, there were actually some lines of dialogue that I didn't catch that actually kind of set up even like the climax later on. So I'll give like the smallest of props. But there was also just like the setup of the three Spider Women that I think is just atrocious. It's total garbage. As Cassie is driving the ambulance, Adam Scott's in the back. He plays Uncle Ben. We don't know him as Uncle Ben yet, but he's Ben Parker. We see this girl on a skateboard. She's kind of doing the Marty McFly, using the back of a vehicle to propel herself. And then she goes around, and as she tries going around, that's where the ambulance is coming. And so Cassie has to slam on the brakes and like gives her a little honk on the horn. And because of that honk on the horn, of course, the Spider-Woman then gives her the finger as she's walking away. And Dakota Johnson's Cassie's line is, who flips off an ambulance. And like it's used as like comedic effect, and it's also setting up one of the Spider-Women as the abrasive, rebellious youth character. But it's also just bad because it's like, no, it's true. Who does flip off an ambulance? And like, as much as you try to make her rebellious, like she just got in the way of the ambulance. It doesn't make sense why she would flip her off. You get multiple scenes of Dakota Johnson acting awkward around people. Like she's given lines of dialogue of like, check his vitals, or check his stomach, his liver, whatever. And then they check this guy's liver and it turns out he's got internal bleeding. And we're like, good catch, well done. But then there's just like other moments where a little kid, you know, one of the patients that she saved, hands her a drawing to say thank you for saving my life, and she's so awkward. And I hate this kind of awkwardness in films. Like, it's kind of her personality trait. It's kind of supposed to be humorous, and it's just painful. And it also just is in conflict. Like, if she's very experienced, this is not going to be the first time that a kid has tried to thank her in this sort of way, and she should know how to act better than how she does. So it just doesn't set things up. We then get a scene of Cassie and Ben trying to connect, trying to build up their characters. It's just dumb. They, like, she says, we both hate family stuff. And it's just dialogue that just no one ever says. Like, they're trying to kind of go for the comedy that's on the outlines of how people's personalities behave. But when you go so far out, you're just going to miss the mark, because a lot of times what we laugh at is what we can relate to. In the same conversation, Ben then tries to take a serious moment to say, hey, I'm in a relationship. And she says something dumb as a remark, and he goes, no, it's serious. And that never goes anywhere. Guess who never gets mentioned again? So thanks for that 20 seconds of uselessness. Didn't build up characters, didn't set up any story. It was just nothing. I guess the only setup it does is there isn't that romantic awkwardness between the two. I guess. I don't know. Speaking of Cassie not having a personality, Dakota Johnson not having good comedic timing, she does wear a cool red jacket, which is like half of her personality. She never takes it off, except when she's just in her little white tank top in the Peruvian jungle. But besides that, she's always wearing this red jacket. Kind of actually fits with the character. It was a cool jacket. I'll give props for that. So we get back to her apartment, where she pulls open this briefcase that she keeps under her bed of like personal belongings, where she then sticks the kid's drawing, which I guess is her way of connecting with, she cares about what she does, and she does secretly care about the kids. But then what was the whole deal of earlier she was like, what do I do with this? And Ben says, just stick it in your pocket and throw it away later like everyone else would. It's just, again, it's just like the emotional marks go in conflict with the lines of dialogue. This is going to be a consistent message of mine. The first like real action scene that we get is there's a scene on a bridge and there's a flipped over car. They get called to the scene to respond to it. Cassie goes in and she saves the patient, gets him out of the car, and before you know it, the car then tumbles off of the bridge into the water, and like because of that it awakens Cassie's abilities, because we have to have the movie doing movie stuff. She saves the patient, and then it's like, okay, car goes over. And like, there's just such a simple way to set this scene up to make it actually work from a tension perspective. So we never get perspective of like, okay, car's flipped over, maybe we get to tell that it's near the side of the bridge. There's never any connection that the film shows us that, oh hey, small movements is going to lean this car over. It's all of a sudden she goes around the side, she gets the patient out, and then oops, okay, time for the car to go over. Like, just give us a couple of seconds of like wobbliness, or like right before they get into the car, show that, oh, we got to be careful. Car's about to flip. Car's about to go over the bridge. Like, there's 5 seconds worth of stuff where you can set up the, oh hey, car tumbles over moment. We go back to the villain who now has these visions, and this is now setting up his other piece of motivation for the film, where this vision is the Spider Women have their powers and they end up killing him. And so during this vision he says, "Where's my spider? They took my spider. I will find them and kill them first." I'm not exaggerating, that's how he says the line. It's so bad. Then we go back and there's now a baby shower. We get introduced to some of the other first responders. It's a happy, baby shower, grill out party. There's another awkward scene. So they first do this thing where they pull out cards and they talk about fond memories of their mothers. Cassie didn't know her mom. She never, she holds a bunch of resentment. So then she just has this awkwardness of like, oh, I never had a good relationship. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be a bad mom. It just turns into this awkwardness that's just like, why do we have this? Then we have her second moment of deja vu. They go in a circle. It's a stupid game to try to guess the baby's name. It's just, nope, nope, not that name. And that's all the game is. And then there's deja vu that happens, more awkwardness. And then the next scene happens, finally for the third time, Cassie starts getting more deja vu and it starts understanding that there's something weird going on. And like, the only emotional moment this film really tries for is when the other like first responder guy gets killed and Cassie feels a little responsible because she kind of sort of saw it in her vision. We saw him once very briefly. They cracked like a joke from not even like many scenes before. No, I'm just talking about like the grill out baby shower that just happened, and then he dies. So we didn't even set up that character, so I don't have an emotional connection, so I don't really care. But the film tries. It tried. We go back to the villain. He says the only other point of his motivation that I found was this other line of dialogue where he says, "I came from nothing. Less than nothing." Well done. That's why he's trying to kill these spider women that are now just teenagers, because he came from nothing. He came from less than nothing. The bad dialogue is not just the villain. Cassie also has this as well. When she gets the deja vu, that finally sets things off where she's like, oh, this is actual like stuff that's going on. It's a pigeon that flies into the window at first, and then she decides it's not going to change anything, literally like her line, opens the window, pigeon flies in. And literally she says to herself, guess you didn't die after all. Amazing lines of dialogue. Also, this is the scene where she realizes that she like has some sort of power. How are you going to illustrate that? So before the vision, or the vision itself, is the bird flies into the window. Well, when you open the window, the reason the bird flew into it was because it was seeing the reflection of the city behind it and thought it could continue flying forward. So if you raise the window, there isn't any reflection. So all the pigeon is looking at is inside of Cassie's apartment at this point, which means it's now not going to fly into the apartment, which does not emotionally resonate as much because it wouldn't just show it going like this far and then turning away. But it literally flies in, it goes, cool, chill place, and then it flies out. Like, it's not bird behavior, it's not realistic. In a movie where we have people with superpowers, my biggest complaint is that the bird doesn't act the way a bird actually would. One of the biggest scenes from the trailer is where they all intervene in the train. That's where the villain comes in and he's going to try to kill these teenagers. Cassie sees the villain and sees this vision that he's going to kill these young women, and so it's her way of trying to like get them to escape. And we're 40 minutes into this 2-hour movie. It's not like that long of a movie, but how else could you get to this point? Because we've seen each of the 3 Spider Women, like we talked about the ambulance flip off, Sydney Sweeney briefly seeing The other chick, briefly seen because she lives at the same apartment complex. And that's all we know so far. Like, there's this edge of, like, mysteriousness, I guess, because they're also the 3 spider women. But, like, how else could we arrive at this train scene and feel more engaged with the film than what we discover here? So far, we've gotten way too many scenes of the villain being stupid. We've gotten the backstory of Cassie's family and the spiders and the powers. And we've gotten a little bit from Cassie, and Cassie is starting to discover her visions. Could we, like, not just take the exposition that the spider women will later tell about, briefly how they're all just on the run and their families don't care about them, so it's this big foster family kind of thing. Maybe, like, actually show us scenes of these 3 young women, start developing that. You know, you can still be like, oh, hey, segment this woman, this woman, this woman. We have Cassie, we have the villain. Each person gets a couple of scenes, set things up. Oh, hey, now we converge at this train, still probably at the 30 to 40 minute range. Now I feel like I know these characters a little bit more. I feel like there's a little bit of stakes. Oh, hey, Cassie, please go save these young women. Instead of just this boilerplate motivation from the villain and Cassie and these random women that we kind of know about. I don't know. It's not perfect because it's a dumb movie, but there's other ways that you could have set this up. At the end of the chase, the villain gets off the train, and there's these cops that want to arrest Cassie because she's suspected of kidnapping these young women. And the villain takes out all 4 surrounding cops around them, and they go, ah, oh my god, ah! And then they run up the stairs. And then he, like, dramatically, like, walks and he, like, chokes out a cop and throws them to the side. But it's like, if he literally took the time to, like, take the cops surrounding the women and then disappeared for 5 seconds so that they could run up the stairs. Again, it's just, like, the small logistical things of, like, the action doesn't work in the way that it should. People don't act the way that they naturally would be motivated to act. It's just how the script wants it to happen. It's kind of like the action from the live action Mulan movie of, like, it just doesn't flow in a way that would connect. And then as they're driving around, Cassie is like, oh, hey, I'm going to just let your parents deal with this. And, like, they tried this stupid comedic thing of, oh, hey, they're going to say something, and then, oh, guess what? The exact opposite thing happens, and it's just very predictable, where she's like, wow, they're going to track this guy down. All right, the cops are going to do this. And then it's then revealed that, no, they're actually looking for Cassie because they didn't see the villain. Somehow, is it because all the cops that saw him are unconscious? And that's why Cassie is wanted? It's very weak for why she now has to go on the run with these kids. And then they start asking her valid questions, and then she gets super frustrated at them, even though she's being super vague. And then she says, okay, we gotta lay low. I'm not kidnapping you, but we gotta lay low. And she takes them to a random forested area. Sure. Okay. And then we get this scene, the big, like, comedic theme that we saw from the trailer was they ask her about her powers, and she's like, I can see the future. And then the rebellious chick throws a rock at her, and she's like, she didn't see that coming. It's, like, the best example of, like, it wasn't funny from the trailer, and, like, the comedic timing and editing is so bad here, because you barely see the rock throwing yourself. So, like, you're not looking at the rebellious chick, and then you barely see her throw it, and then it cuts to Dakota's reaction shot to it. Where it's like, if you're going to have this physical comedy of, oh hey, she's not going to see this coming even though she should be able to see the future, show us clearly that she's going to throw the rock so that we see it. Otherwise, I'm like, I didn't see it coming either. Why would I laugh at that? And then Cassie says, don't be stupid, stay here for 3 hours, I promise I'll be back. Yo, it's nighttime in a forest and they don't have food or anything. Obviously, these teenagers that don't know you are not going to listen to you when you say to stay in the forest. So, again, it's just stupid why it then sets up the next action scene where the women almost get killed because they're dancing on top of this table at this diner. When the three girls decide to leave the forest, by the way, what I noticed on my second watch through of this, they left the fire running. So they made Smokey very upset. So Smokey does not approve of Madame Web either. I think one of the biggest logistical leaps of this entire film is the reason the villain knows to go to the diner is because this guy at the diner recognizes the women as the missing persons, and they call 911 for it. How does this guy at the diner recognize the women? From the newspaper, from the kidnapping that happened 3 hours ago. He's reading this article. Yeah, that didn't actually happen. You just needed the villain to show up, and this was the best way you thought of for this to happen. Great job. Briefly, the villain and Cassie interact during this action scene, and he says, "Your mother underestimated me. Don't make the same mistake." What? When did her mom underestimate you? You were hired as her bodyguard for protection. So she didn't underestimate you. You just lied to her and betrayed her. That's not underestimating someone. That's not saying, I know this guy's pretty bad, but I can handle myself. No, it's you hired him to protect you. It doesn't make sense. This movie doesn't make sense. Am I crazy? So it sets up the big climactic scene where they go on the run from the villain. Is they're being protected actually pretty well over at Ben's sister's place, Peter Parker's mom. That mom, played by Emma What's-Her-Face, the Emma that people don't care about anymore, her water breaks. And Ben goes, "Oh, I gotta take it to the hospital. And I also have to take the 3 young women with me? Why? Just leave them there. Like, they're teenagers. They can look after themselves." No, it's because you needed them in the cars so that a security camera, I guess, can recognize the faces of one of them so the villain knows how to track them down. That's your reason. And then Cassie comes in for the rescue in this ambulance, which the ambulance pulls up to the house because Cassie arrives back at the house. But why did the ambulance show up here? If they're already on their way to the hospital, maybe I just don't know the procedure. I guess they called and they're like, wait, no, never mind. Let's just go ourselves, I guess. And then, so they're sitting in the car and the villain's like about to he jumps on their car. So car people, villain, right on top of it, and he's going to, kill them. And Cassie takes the ambulance, jumps through this higher story building. She crashes through a billboard, and ambulance gets launched like this. And obviously she's not going to land the ambulance on the car, so the physics tell us that her ambulance is going to go over the car people. But the way that they portray this is the villain turns around, is looking at it, and because they want to make it clear that the ambulance is not going to hit the car and endanger the people inside, it goes pretty high over. So what the villain does is he jumps up so that he then gets hit by the ambulance. I guess you can kind of reason this off as quick wit reaction is I am trying to jump out of the way. It just was kind of stupid though of how we're setting up the ultimate climax. One of the moments I did laugh at was the villain's demise. Again, I'm just spoiling this. You don't care. Literally the same effects as the Die Hard villain when Alan Rickman falls off the roof and he goes like, "No!" Literally same quality as the villain when he falls and then the sign falls on top of him. It looks so cheesy. And the big climax is is Cassie being like, "Duck now!" And then a firework kind of shoots the villain. And she gets this power of she can be in multiple places at one time. And like it kind of sets up this like, ooh, she's going to get some cool powers. And it's literally just, you know, the three women are like hanging off sides of different things. And she's like, give me your hand. And she helps them up. Cool. It's so lame. And it's just like, this is the big finale of the movie. It's just a setup movie. That's all it is trying to set up these characters. But how much setup do you actually need? You show us less than like 3 minutes of these visions of these Spider-Women with their powers, using their powers. That already is a cooler movie than what we got. Like, how much do you actually need to set up before the young women get their powers? And you could have had some cool different dynamics of his visions now coming true. Although Cassie says like lines of like, they were never your future. I was. You know, something pretty lame. I don't know. Like, give us more than these women kind of running at like 60% speed away from this terrible villain that says dumb lines of dialogue. By the way, his dialogue too, like, I don't know what it was. I don't know if like maybe like the audio they captured on set didn't really match up with what he said. You barely get any shots of him actually like from the front where he's able to like emote to the best of his abilities when he's speaking his lines. But I could like promise you that there are some lines where like you kind of am seeing it from like this view and you see like the side of his face and you kind of see the moves, the mouth moving. It does not line up with like the words that he says. It's very bizarre. It does not look like it was done properly. With the three young Spider-Women, you have Sydney Sweeney that is playing the shy, kind of klutzy, but oops, I'm still kind of cute. You have the brash, abrasive one, and then you have the geek. And what I've talked about in like reviews that I've written before is this principle of how you're going to display your characters. So it's like they have the personalities and then they have the story. The writers ended up doing was they took that and they said, what makes sense for these characters to say to fit their personality? And that doesn't work. Instead of what they should have done, which is to say, what would these characters organically react to based on the situation at hand? Because if you think like that, now you're still going to get their personality, but now they're going to act in a more logical sense rather than basing how they should respond because, oh, you're a geek, so you're going to make a geeky reference. And it just feels very thrown in, and it just doesn't feel real. You get Dakota Johnson verbally talking through her personality instead of trying to, you know, use her acting, show us her emotions instead of saying them. That's on Dakota, that's on the director, that's also on the editor. All of those people should have worked better together. The visual effects are also bad. Like when they first escape, and it's Dakota and the three women in the car. It's one of the worst green screen cars I've ever seen. Like, the whole movie, you could tell is just a green screen film because everything is just very broadly backlit and there's like no change whatsoever during the car ride of any lighting at all. It feels very hammed together. The visuals are really bad. The director is also at fault. Like, all the camera angles feel just very random for why we're looking at this. Occasionally, some of the things, like a fence, I guess, looks a little bit like a spider web. I think that's what they were going for in like a couple of shots, was like, this looks a little bit like a spider web. Otherwise, everything else just felt very random. Editing is super choppy, especially with like the Peruvian spider people. There's so many cuts. And like I get as well, like the visuals are bad too, so you gotta like kind of stitch stuff together, but you just don't ever get a sense of like where you're at in a scene. Very forgettable music. I couldn't think of any tune that happened. The only notable thing is they played Toxic by Britney Spears, and they can't really take credit for that. The film also had to be sponsored by Pepsi. They make a joke of like at Backyard Barbecue, oh hey, give me some alcohol. well, you just had a concussion. Here's a Pepsi instead. You also see a giant Pepsi sign. I think that's like the ending climactic scene. Lots of Pepsi product placement. That was pretty obvious. All in all, Madame Web is very bad. I laughed a couple of times, not because the film was trying to be funny, but because it was just laughably bad. Worst villain I've seen in a superhero movie possibly ever. Terrible action because there just wasn't much. Story doesn't make sense. Terrible writing. Bad editing. Choppy visual effects. There really is not much going for this film at all. I'm not sure if I'm just going to keep the 1 to 10 score rating. That's what I'll just use for this film right now, in which case this film earns its 3 out of 10. It's a bad movie. You don't need to watch it. It's not a laughably bad movie. It's just bad. It is currently on Netflix, but I'm warning you, you don't need to see it. And whatever Sony does moving forward with these characters, if they will develop something else, it's not worth seeing this movie. Just see whatever they throw out next and hope it's better. Or don't go see that if it's not good either. We'll see if I stitch anything together. I am still very fresh to the whole video process, starting to learn more about editing, how stuff is supposed to look. It's a lot of undertaking, but I feel like it's a way for me to connect on a way that just writing movie reviews doesn't allow for that. I don't really have the time to consistently edit videos for this, but it's something that I think is something that I would enjoy to continue to do. I actually have an idea for the next video that I want to do. I recently watched some stuff that was like adapted from a book, so I kind of want to talk about like books versus movies. There's many ideas that I could ultimately look at. It just is not going to be a consistent video schedule based on editing, just based on timing with everything, so we'll see how much I'm able to maintain. But if this is something that you thought was, especially if you're someone that read any of my previous reviews, this is something that you thought was a better format to watch this stuff, or if I should just stick to the movie reviews, those are way quicker to write overall. So it's something that if it's worth the effort, then would love to continue to do this. We'll see what happens. No matter what, if you stuck around to the end of this video, I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Feel free to, critique the video itself, critique what I said. Did you disagree? Are you a fan? You're not. You could be a fan of this movie. It's allowed. I usually let people have their opinions and leave it at that. Oh, but if you actually enjoyed this movie, that could be something to talk about. Hey, hopefully I'll see you at the next one. Thanks, guys. See ya. I guess part of the whole theme of it was the visions aren't true. You can create your future. That's more of the actual theme of it.